But I don't want to see tomorrow. Okay, Delaney.
Is this a safe space to approach the idea that Disney on the whole might be a bit more of a trend chaser than we like to admit? You guys thought that Spanish cat having a realistic depiction of a panic attack was cool? We got a whole sequel to a movie you love where the panic attack is a character. Twiddly British bear movies get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Ooh, wow, what? Wouldn't you know it? It's a movie all about Winnie the Pooh. Isn't he so real and cute and real and wholesome and real? We have our own Lord of the Rings with blackjack and hookers. I am not saying that all of these ideas were solely the result of Disney seeing another studio receive positive attention and crafting an entire bajillion-dollar project just for the sake of replicating it. Odds are good that many of these concepts already existed in some form, but maybe were just encouraged in certain directions. But I am saying that there is a very real history of Disney unsubtly grabbing at other people's toys.
Come on, everybody, and mouse your size. Mickey's Mouse size.
And if you're still not convinced, or you think that Michael Eisner was just some kind of cosmic pick-me anomaly, you don't have to look much further than the greatest branding opportunity it ever missed out on. The Wizard of Oz is something of a white whale in the film industry in general, but you can kind of tell it's been a particular source of annoyance for Disney over the years that this one really major hallmark of musical fairy tale cinema exists like just out of their reach. Rights to all the other Oz books go on sale? Buy the whole batch before anyone else can snake you out of it again. Hey, the Mouseketeers really want to make it, and you wouldn't want to let down the Mouseketeers, would ya? Oz movies fall through? Make your own adaptation of a popular 1900s operetta based on a children's story starring Ray Bolger, with blackjack and Annette Funicello. But nothing ever took, and it seemed that Walt's vision for the Yellow Brick Road would follow him to the grave. Except no, even after that, it just never stopped. Wow, there sure is a lot of Wizard of Oz in this great movie ride. Here's Muppet Wizard of Oz with blackjack and it is so rich how they busted other studios for kinda sorta legally distinct sequels to their own films in the 80s, and then turned around and did the exact same shit with their first Oz adaptation. Oh no, it's based off the book designs. Sure, man, that's totally why you called it Return to Oz. I actually think Return to Oz has a lot of charm, and it definitely traumatized a million trillion kids, but on the whole, it's been kind of satisfying that Disney's never been able to pick up the torch and turn Oz into their own forever product. You own, literally, every other popular children's fairy tale. You'll live. Oz remains a steadfast cultural fixture in spite of failed attempts from basically every other studio in the world to grab its bag. But as cinema history goes on, you find him slowing to a decent murmur for no other reason than people just loving that original movie too damn much. It really happened at the exact right time to be what it was and have the shelf life that it did. And every now and then, someone tries to do a new big-budget Oz thing, and it never really gets off the ground in quite the same way, if at all. We throw up our hands, go home, and wait for the next unpopular political figure to die so we can send Ding Dong the Witch is Dead back to number 2 on the charts. Except it's 2003, and right as the fairy tale musical about girls following their dreams genre seems pretty settled in its grave, bing bong, who's that at the door? It's Wicked, the Broadway adaptation of Gregory Maguire's popular 1995 novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. While the novel was originally optioned for a straight film adaptation, composer Stephen Schwartz approached Maguire with a pretty obvious counteroffer. If there's one thing people of every generation know about Oz, It's that everyone there sings. Schwartz's score and Winnie Holtzman's book feel, for all intents and purposes, like a Disney-fied revision of the novel. Gone are the extended plots about bisexual infidelity and religious fanaticism in the interest of keeping a tighter focus on Wicked Witch Elphaba, Good Witch Glinda, and how their budding relationship is challenged by their inevitable roles in the political history of Oz. And while the era of the mega musical was basically at a close, Wicked became the last major smash on the level of Phantom or Les Mis, with over 20 years residence on Broadway and the West End, multiple tours, and numerous successful productions worldwide. And also maybe a couple of movies. I don't know. I think you would assume that I've done a whole video about this, because I personally really care about Wicked, and if I'm being honest, I actually fell out of love with it years ago. Maybe it was just from being a theater kid at the time that it was popular, and I wasn't very popular amongst theater kids, and then you listen to your classmates belt out "I'm not that girl" with their whole chest, despite very much being that girl. It lost the shine for me. It happens like that sometimes. It's nothing personal. But that's just one drop in the pond, The rest of the world was crazy for Wicked. And boy howdy, did people who like money notice? I think a misconception that goes around when we joke about Disney's seething envy of Wicked is that they were ever actually capable at any point of getting the film rights to the musical. No, that is objectively untrue. Wicked was produced by Universal's theatrical division. It was always their lock, so unless Wicked had somehow gone down in flames and collapsed the economies of 5 micronations on the way, the movie was theirs forever. But I don't know, you gotta think that it must have bothered them. That they tried to get cool after Shrek publicly thrashed their shit, put the Singing Princess movies well and truly in the ground, and then here comes Wicked, a girly fairy tale musical composed by one of their own frequent Oscar-winning collaborators, based off a property they always wanted to scrape some money off of in some way, becoming an international mega hit and completely revitalizing a story which had comfortably settled into the public zeitgeist, all without having to leave the original work in a state of total disrepair. Trust me, they know that it makes bank. Choices like adapting the midlife crisis of fairy tale musicals into The Woods, or renaming all of your princess movies with one-word adjective titles, sure do make a lot more sense when you've got this musical in your peripheral vision. And we're focusing on movies launching major tentpole franchises, products which require much more intensive market testing for broad appeal and staying power as a brand than a TV show would, so no Once Upon a Time, because I value what precious moments on this earth are left to me. But you can look anywhere in the wider Disney product catalog and see where the Wicked influence has seeped in. Like their publishing house, where you have literally 2 concurrent ongoing book series doing Disney AUs, one of which is a shared universe thing, where the same 3 witches are making all of the bad shit happen in every Disney movie, and one with such hooks as, what if Rapunzel's mother drank a potion from the wrong flower? Or, what if Nala was compelled to team up with Scar for a secret reason? Or Twisted Wonderland, which is more of a result of the surge in popularity of the Villains franchise than anything to do with Wicked, but if I didn't mention Twisted Wonderland, half of my comments would have assumed I've never heard of it, so there you go, take it, weebs. While the 1-2 punch of Shrek and Wicked definitely collided to inspire this wave of reinvented anti-heroes for kids, I think it's fair to say that when we are narrowing down the field of what's hewing specifically towards Wicked, gender is a key component, because the clear trend in male-led films for kids like Despicable Me, Megamind, The Bad Guys, and Wreck-It Ralph is that they jobify the idea of villainy, using the context of video games or comic books. Being the bad guy is an actual position you can maintain within the system. While there is a varying component of social stigma, the conflict usually comes down to a sort of midlife discontentment with how the mischief-making roles they've either chosen or been pushed into over time don't fulfill their emotional needs. More sad clowns than Wicked witches. Like, they cover 80% of Wicked in the first 10 minutes of Megamind. That's kind of what we're running with here. I point out that most of these protagonists are male because I think it speaks to the idea that we as a culture are largely more accepting of this kind of petty comedic cruelty from male characters than we are from female characters, unless you're like Harley Quinn. But if you can believe it, that tolerance has its limits.
With only faith in my father's prophecy, I've waited. For you, great wizard from Kansas, to come and set things right.
I got real lucky that Jack Saint did his own essay last year about why Sam Raimi's 2013 Oz prequel is an awful, shambling nightmare, so I can use the excuse of supporting a new dad to send you to his video and absolve myself of having to think of this film more than necessary. Not that it was going to warrant much time on my side to begin with, because even though it was very successful, I think they figured out within the year that this probably was not the approach. Also, I watched this with a friend, and he hasn't said as much, but I do feel like it damages our friendship if it turns out that I made him do that and then didn't even discuss it in the fucking video. I'm sorry, Josh.
I was like, how bad could it be?
Right.
Like, I even thought his Marvel movie was fine. It's much worse than you could expect.
Oz the Great and Powerful definitely owes as much, if not more, to Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland as it does to Wicked. A revised take on a classic fairy tale which for some reason is very eager to displace its young female protagonist in service of a zany male side character who will totally not age the film like milk on hot-ass pavement.
What is he doing?
Underwear.
But where Alice sends its narrative forward in time, Oz moves backward, remythologizing the arrival of carnival magician Oscar Diggs into the land of Oz. And obviously changes had to be made, right? It is very fair to say that deposing a trans child and stealing her kingdom is not what I would call a winning hero's journey. But I think if it's even possible, what they came up with is just as nasty. Oscar is an aggressively rude, womanizing piece of shit who I think we're supposed to cheer on in his secret dream of becoming a great man, even though all he's doing is trying to scam these witches into sexual favors to steal their money. And also, this prophecy from the King of Oz said he was going to do it anyway, so the narrative is literally holding his hand into not being a fuckboy anymore. Saint makes the observation that the appeal of a movie about the wizard was likely that it promised a Disney analog to Iron Man, particularly when you consider that the first actor they approached for the role was Robert Downey Jr. To executives, it promised more of a classic fairy tale figure than Tony Stark or even Jack Sparrow, but with the same roguish edge to his amoral behavior. But the wizard has always been characterized by a certain amount of bullshit, which Wicked rightly identifies as less RDJ and more, well,
strategery.
someone whom, even if you attempt to humanize them, you inevitably wind up deciding, yeah, this person probably shouldn't really be in charge of anything. I feel like bluster is the key element to warming up to the character of Oz, whether you portray him as a hero or a villain. If you're gonna rework him into your protagonist, you really need to stay on that Army of Darkness track, where part of his charm is that he's too stupid to be actively malicious when he's rude or irresponsible. You needed 1992 Bruce Campbell for this job. Hell, even 2012 Bruce Campbell was way better suited for this job, and not... Ugh. But let's get so for real. No recast could have made this a movie about anything other than a magic patriarchy prophecy which revolves around the most powerful women in Oz waiting for some new penis to fly into town. No amount of gormless appeal could have saved this film from its core conceit of the wizard sleeping his way down the yellow brick road and one night standing Mila Kunis so bad she ate a poison apple from her evil Party City witch sister and turned into Margaret Hamilton with her cans out, which put a pin in that, we're gonna return to her. Why I bring it up at all and make life difficult for myself is because in conversation with the next film, it seems as if there's an attempt to feel out what attracts people to Wicked. It stands to reason that with Oz being such a historic moneymaker, as an executive you would ask, is it the flipped narrative stuff or will any prequel to Oz automatically generate cash? And Oz the Great and Powerful actually did real numbers, strong enough that a sequel was in conversation for a few years until, I don't know, probably something came up. Until Wicked Part 1, it was the highest grossing Oz-related film ever made. But within a year, the company was going to have a very clear answer about which direction was going to pay dividends.
Let it go, let it go.
Alright, technically Frozen came next, I know. But keep in mind that at the time, Disney animation was still creeping out of its slump era from the aughts. Enchanted, Princess and the Frog, and Tangled, their first stabs at putting princess movies back into the cinematic ecosystem, were all decently successful, but not Frozen. It is well documented that whatever numbers the company expected Frozen to do, Frozen did basically 10 times over. People were remortgaging houses to get their hands on Frozen merch. That's how low the expectations were. No. The actual property, which was being primed to fill a Wicked-shaped hole in Disney's catalog, came from inside the house. And it was, to be fair, a diabolically good approach to filling this particular brief. You know, it really makes me queasy that some of you watching missed the heights of the Hot Topic era. I have viewers who never stepped foot into one of those stores before there was an entire wall of Funko Pops where the Avenged Sevenfold t-shirts used to live. Viewers who have walked into that store without so much as a whiff of an Invader Zim hoodie. Viewers who never had to explain to their parents, yeah, I know it's right next to the Spencer's gift shop, but I promise they don't also do the cake pop molds of little dicks. But surprisingly, this period was really the setup for the Disney comeback in the 10s. Keep in mind that in the aughts, Disney was firmly a brand for children. Their only in-house franchise with any adult appeal was Pirates of the Caribbean. And once that seemed to be hitting the end of its natural lifespan, the process of trying to tap into the next big thing was visibly punishing.
I would love to have John Carter's powers. He can jump really, really high, he's super strong and fearless.
Prince Dastan or Oscar Diggs or Benjamin Franklin Gates never really attracted the same level of mass appeal as Jack Sparrow. And on top of that, alternative teenage fans have been a demographic Disney always historically struggled to target. Pirates, yeah, but other than that, it was like The Nightmare Before Christmas or Kingdom Hearts. And those had cult fandoms, but they were very niche properties with broadly presumed target audiences of teen boys, at least from a marketing team's perspective. The girls who were there were there. Meanwhile, as a teen girl, your choices were Hannah Montana, Camp Rock, or Wizards of Waverly Place. And if none of those did anything for you at that point, you were basically on another planet to these people. But there were fans of all genders who didn't want to filter themselves out of enjoying Disney on the whole when they aged. Rather, as their media intake expanded, they wanted to play with the brand and indulge in grungier aesthetic sensibilities. Scary Disney princesses, princesses in band t-shirts, that one picture of Rapunzel everybody photoshopped into themselves, Disney Tumblr, the hype around that fucked up Epic Mickey concept art that wasn't what the game was ever going to look like at all, actually. On their own, they might not have been much to take seriously, but put together and combined with the surge in Hot Topic and the goth emo subculture's popularity, it demonstrated that it was worth testing whether there was an audience that would come out for this on a larger scale. And Alice in Wonderland, with Burton's name and some creepy swirls attached, proved that they very much would. This, among other things, is the seed of what we recognize now as the Disney adult movement, and how the company responded to it basically dictated its transformation over the course of the past decade and a half. So in that bridge between Hot Topic and the contemporary content Ouroboros, we have 2014's Maleficent, which uses the window of interest in gothy Disney movies to take a shot at the most cut and dry attempt to replicate Wicked's success. Not a musical, though. This is a real movie. I actually think that the concept on the whole is kind of a slam dunk. Maleficent in many ways has a lot in common with the Wicked Witch. Maybe not terribly complicated, but they just work. Where the witch's entertainment value comes from her vaudeville sensibilities, the cackling and the wisecracking. And seriously, if you haven't watched this movie in a while, this woman is addicted to one-liners.
Wanna play ball? Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of spears. That's how much longer you got to be alive.
Maleficent builds off of what made the evil queen so memorable in the original Snow White. Someone very graceful and imposing, but with an undercurrent of mischief that always feels as if it's about to crack. And even though all the classic princess films are pretty light on plot, Sleeping Beauty leaves enough to the imagination that, much like The Witch, it seems the most obvious avenue to explore what might have happened in those gaps where we don't see Maleficent's perspective. What might add more dimension to this character and the rest of that original film by proxy? Wow, I want a breezy video after Man Bad Horror, I said. Oh, this Wicked essay sure seems fun, I said. Yeah, the big dragon in the room when discussing Maleficent is that allegory. That Maleficent's inciting trauma, the thing that turns her into the mistress of all evil, is being drugged and mutilated in her sleep by a man she shared an intimate evening with. A man who thinks that this is the humane thing to do rather than killing her like he's been ordered. Credit where credit is due. I have to recognize that it was a ballsy choice to even introduce this subtext into the story. Objectively, the ballsiest out of anything in this video. That Angelina Jolie and screenwriter Linda Wolverton were so conscious of what they wanted the moment where Maleficent's wings are cut off to be, and were actually allowed to see that through to the final product, is really impressive. It is complex in the way which makes Wicked so engaging, that it takes a narrative for children and introduces these behaviors which are messier and in some ways much darker than a binary of good and evil. Nothing in the movie is ever this complicated again, least of all Stefan, but it's one of those things where you can see that this concept genuinely has legs. It confronts Disney's original sanitized adaptation of Sleeping Beauty with its roots, the many retellings of and inspirations for the fairy tale which romanticize women being assaulted and impregnated during the enchanted sleep. The most that they have ever done to admit that their films do not exist in a vacuum. And I am gonna rip the shit out of the rest of Maleficent, to be clear. But as with anything I discuss, I gotta stress that if this spoke to you, whether it had to do with a traumatic experience or just a dark moment in your life, I can't take your relationship with a movie away, and I really don't want to. I unambiguously think that in isolation, this works. But there's so many places where it's clear they just weren't thinking through how much this ripples across the rest of the story. That this structurally turns the film into a revenge narrative, which does not at all want to be a revenge narrative. That the loss of Maleficent's wings as an incredibly grisly metaphor gets kind of sloppy and weird when it turns out the wings are like sentient and can snap back on like a Polly Pocket. Also, the three good fairies are running interference for the man who physically assaulted Maleficent the entire time, which, hey, could be something. Let's talk about what women have to gain by undermining other powerful women to uphold patriarchal systems which are built on masking acts of abuse committed by— Nope! Not even that! They're just pissy morons now. They never liked Aurora that much. Don't take it that seriously. Here's Imelda Staunton doing the exact same bit she did in those wizard movies. The only thing that you would know her from, American audience in 2014. We have formed an opinion about these characters for you. And that really drives me up the wall, because if there is a net positive from the tidal wave of Disney academia in the 10s, it is the reframing of the original film away from Aurora and back onto the fairies. That once you disavail yourself of the notion that the protagonist must be Sleeping Beauty because her name is the title, you're working with a narrative which is largely motivated by older magical women. The Good Fairy's development from frothy stock characters to mothers fighting to save their surrogate daughter is kind of the secret ingredient that has allowed Sleeping Beauty to age with relative grace, arguably better than either Snow White or Cinderella. You don't have to like it, but this is undeniably a film about all different kinds of women. So that Maleficent folds to bad faith critiques and completely throws the Good Fairies in the garbage for the sake of recentering the pretty, merchandisable characters isn't just frustrating, but an overall symptom of the movie's biggest issue, and a trend that will plague us in general. That rather than give the entire cast more nuance the way Wicked does, anyone who isn't Maleficent, Aurora, or the prince for some reason is completely morally inverted. It's not that everything Maleficent did has more complex motivations than we thought. It's that she was secretly good the whole time, and the story actually turned out super great for her, and if she did something bad, either no she didn't, or yes, but she felt really, really sorry about doing it. This is not a bad person. Please don't say online that this is a bad person. And okay, to be fair, the edges on Elphaba's misdeeds in the original Oz, and hell, even Wicked the book, get sanded down a decent amount by Wicked the musical. But it does, if nothing else, faithfully retain the timeline of the original story. Hunting down the shoes, kidnapping Dorothy. She still does all of that. But the rest of Wicked is about building to those events. All of the other accidents and mistakes that pile up behind her that the musical adds, which cause her to buckle and internalize this public persona of wickedness just long enough for the Wizard of Oz to happen. It has the job of selling us the idea that what we all saw from Dorothy's perspective was Elphaba at her breaking point after years of failure and abuse, rather than some malice inherent in her character the way the original made it out. But that feels leagues away from Maleficent, which is so afraid of having to justify any of the nastier things that she does that it outright absolves her of most of it, barring the one it really legitimately can't. Why did she hate the princess? No, she didn't. Why did she put up thorns to stop the prince? No, she didn't. Why did she turn into a dragon? No, she didn't. Fairies are girls and dragons are boys. I don't know. Stop asking questions. And speaking of girls, on the one hand, I can respect the movie not doing character assassination on Aurora to make Maleficent look even more correct than she already does. If Wicked doesn't do it to Dorothy, it makes sense to leave Aurora alone. But Wicked also isn't about Dorothy, whereas Maleficent is honestly much more about Aurora than it really should be. Instead of the Good Fairies, Aurora is now Maleficent's surrogate daughter. And once the film's dispensed with all of that new, super dark backstory as rapidly as it possibly can, their relationship is basically the crux of the plot. Which you would expect this would affect the way that Aurora is characterized, given that apparently the story has already been misrepresented to some degree, but it really doesn't besides, she likes mud. The whole middle chunk, after the curse has been cast, has the exact same tone as one of those direct-to-DVD Tinkerbell movies.
Tinkerbell, all new movie on DVD and Blu-ray today. Rated G.
Aurora spins around and gushes about how pretty trees are, and Maleficent's like, wow, I've never met a human who likes trees. Maybe racism is over. It's sneaky what this movie does. Rather than give Maleficent her own full-body narrative leading into Sleeping Beauty, it uses her perspective to recraft the original narrative from the ground up. And already that kind of breaks the rules of a Wicked-like. Unlike a reframing that pads out the bones of the thing we know, it's a complete retelling. No, actually. If you said that original movie was unfeminist on the internet, it turns out that everyone who made it was collectively lying. But it also creates the problem of, wait, if the film acknowledges we've already heard a version of this story, which it does,
So you see, the story is not quite as you were told.
where the hell did the old one come from then?
Who's my favorite robot?
Wicked answers this question with the original character of Madame Morrible, Elphaba's magic tutor who trains her to work for the wizard. And when Elphaba refuses and turns against him, Morrible engineering the hate campaign hounding Elphaba lends some in-universe credence to why the story we know is the popular one.
Right!
Whatever Elphaba does, Morrible will find some way to warp it against her and feed the narrative of Glinda the Good. And the citizens of Oz are so blinded by the easy, attractive form of morality being presented to them that they will lap it up. But even putting Morrible's role to one side, there's already so much in place within the original text that makes a mature expansion of The Wizard of Oz feel seamless, that the wizard is a big con artist whose authority is tenuous at best.
You're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
That beauty, especially for women, is a moral attribute in a world with one green-skinned lady that everybody hates.
I've never heard of a beautiful witch before. Only bad witches are ugly.
And that this is all being processed by a foreign child with no context for the situation whatsoever, getting shoved at the problem like, hey, you don't get to go home until you commit an extrajudicial murder on my one political enemy. Shut the fuck up and take it on faith that this person completely deserves it. On the other hand, I don't know if Maleficent presents any compelling argument as to why a whitewashed version of this story exists. Stefan is dead after converting his kingdom into a military state, and there was no love lost between anybody there. In the sequel, Philip's mom, racist Catwoman, tries to Morrible Maleficent herself, but once she's out of the way, Philip's dad is super cool with her, and the union of human and fey nations is met with unanimous approval.
And suddenly, he wasn't racist anymore.
It seems like, by the time we leave off, people are pretty uniformly chill with Maleficent and her fairy buddies being around, so like, who's even telling the old story anymore?
In the end, my kingdom was united not by a hero or a villain, but by one who was both hero and villain.
They cram a lot of Wicked-isms into the second film in a way which just comes off as clumsy and incongruous with the first movie's relative simplicity. The Morrible, the main duo briefly breaking up, the fake-out death, not one but two groups of fairies the humans are plotting to ethnic cleanse, which I think lends credence to the defense of Maleficent 1, that it is the way it is because it wasn't prepared to be the first to go that far. An insane thing to say about a movie with this scene in it. But then to retroactively try to make your attempt at Wicked even more superficially similar, especially when you've already burned through all of your source material and can't meaningfully impact it anymore, really just calls attention to the fact that you felt insecure about trying to do this with one of your pre-established brands in the first place. Because even if most adaptations of The Wizard of Oz are chasing that original 39 film, Wicked included, the state of Oz as a public domain work means that in the wake of that movie, it's led 1 million lives. You can reinterpret the witches, the wizard, even the scarecrow or Tin Man and Cowardly Lion, and it doesn't really scratch what anybody else is doing at all. Disney may not own Sleeping Beauty the fairy tale, or Sleeping Beauty the ballet, but it does own the only version with Maleficent, and the dragon, and the lyrics to Once Upon a Dream. And if it wants to use those trademarks, which it has to sell this movie, it's not super willing to fuck with them so much that consumers who love the original actually get frustrated. Aurora, and I guess Philip in a Ken doll kind of way, have too much material value outside of this film to compromise. You don't need people asking why they're cheering on Philip fighting the main character of your film during the Festival of Fantasy parade. Instead, all it can really be is a version of Sleeping Beauty where catsuit fairy godmother Maleficent is actually the protagonist the whole time and secretly did all the cool heroic stuff behind the scenes, rather than someone whose agenda we may have misinterpreted in the context of the story we know.
In Disney's Maleficent, wishes and dreams do come true. Just like at Subway, where you can choose whatever your heart desires.
This is obviously the most cut and dry whip at Wicked's nachos, and it did fine. Fine enough that they've kept a third sequel on the table for at least 5 years, but not so much more than fine that it's overridden the popularity of the original. At present, the branding of Crystal Pepsi Maleficent just kind of awkwardly coexists with the branding of Maleficent Classic, which is also the situation Cruella later found itself in, by the way, in case you were wondering. But what if there was an alternative where you didn't have to worry about the potential clash between your reinvention and your pre-established brand, or really, any pre-established brand? What if instead of having to rehabilitate an existing villain and risk treading on the toes of a profitable franchise, you could just kind of create your own from scratch? What if you could lift the narrative skeleton out of Wicked's meaty insides, the broad strokes of its plot and characters and themes, and just suck the marrow from its bones while exercising complete creative freedom over the final product? And not only that, but sell double the dolls. Barring the absolute shit show that was Oz the Great and Powerful, Frozen was maybe the most punishing watch of the batch. Not in a hyperbolic way in response to its insane popularity, though, for what it's worth, it's been my opinion since 2013 that the film deflates a third of the way through. No. I mean in the sense that it is undeniably one of the most influential films of the 2010s. And largely for the worse.
Wait, what? Wait, what? Wait, what? Wait, what? Wait, what?
I felt like I was watching ground zero for a lot of things that were frustrating about the rest of the decade in cinema. I certainly do not believe it helped anyone in the long run for Disney to learn that a movie with a script this patchy could be rewarded with the Wind Rises Oscar and $1 billion, as long as something about it went viral. But Frozen was a bigger, smashier smash than any other attempt from the Walt Disney Corporation because it forced them to commit to the two really, really crucial ingredients to Wicked's success. One was being a musical. Two was understanding that the only thing better for marketing than one girl in a pretty dress is another, slightly goofier girl, also in a pretty dress, but pink. Let's pause here for a moment, because I've been alluding to Shrek and Wicked as the big hitters in the aughts rush of villain protagonists, and in the history of Disney, specifically, they are the most relevant. But during this same period, older audiences were gravitating towards this light primetime sitcom called The Sopranos. If you were too young for The Sopranos' dominance over the TV landscape, you gotta understand it completely changed the way protagonists were allowed to behave on screen, even in a serious drama. Prior to the advent of cable, television was not designed for a main character that was unambiguously this much of a bad person. But what made Tony Soprano such a magnetic lead is that by guiding us into the framework of a mob boss in therapy, the show is inviting us to question who he is and why he does what he does. And you always have the secret hope that maybe just for 5 minutes he would be better, but... And it may have opened the floodgate for the golden age of misinterpreted TV shows about emotionally repressed men and their bitch wives. But stories meant for broader audiences, particularly those which include kids, can't get quite as dark, so you cheat a little bit. Shrek isn't particularly cruel, but when you put him next to Donkey, it makes his misanthropic worldview more pronounced. Ralph and Gru and Mr. Wolf are antagonists by trade, so the narrative can be framed as a divide between the needs of a job and an unfulfilling personal life.
Then I have moment of clarity. If Zangief is good guy, who'll crush man's skull like sparrow's egg between thighs?
It gets the point across in a way viewers of any age will pretty straightforwardly understand without sacrificing emotional stakes. But Elphaba isn't evil or conflicted or even very misanthropic about her place in the world at all. Not that she's happy with it, but she is ultimately trying to do her best to do good most of the time. So if the moral tensions in Wicked's narrative aren't constantly coming from her, who are they coming from?
It's good to see me, isn't it?
If there is any key element to why Wicked retains its bite, even amongst all of its imitators over the years, it's Glinda. For as much as Elphaba is the story's anchor, it really relies on Glinda to serve as its counterweight. Where Elphaba's arc is about how holding on to her beliefs and embracing her power for her own reasons gives people license to act on their prejudice towards her, Glinda's is about the social concept of goodness, and how we allow ourselves to be complicit in things simply because we've been told they are good. And Glinda, or Galinda, is constantly being reassured that she's good, for her aesthetic worth, but also her general performance of niceness, selective as it may be, is enough evidence to enable people's confirmation bias toward her. But subconsciously, she wants something she actually has to earn. She's just been too coddled to know what that looks like, or what she might have to sacrifice for it. 'Cause Glinda's fatal flaw is that she always defaults to the system. She both trusts it too much to really challenge it, and fears the consequences of betraying it even when she knows it's wrong. Even if, ironically, she has much more power to influence change than she actually knows. Her popularity is her weapon, and she only really starts doing anything of value when she stops letting Morrible and the Wizard abuse it for their own propaganda. But she also has to live the rest of her life knowing that she had the chance to stand with Elphaba, and when she chose silence over what she knew was right, it had a major cost for basically everyone she ever loved. And Bach. She just didn't think the Wizard was going to eat her face. Yet it's really impressive on the writer's part that Glinda is still a character we can love and relate to, in spite of the way she fails herself and Elphaba throughout the story. Which is a lot. Honestly, the emotional response we as an audience have to Glinda hews way closer to Tony Soprano than Elphaba ever does. All Elphaba's doing is trying to hold on to her principles. It's Glinda who's trying to ignore that she has any. It's Glinda who keeps burying herself in excess to forget how goddamn miserable she really is. It's Glinda who's undermining her own best instincts so she can never reach a conclusion she doesn't want to come to. Like Tony, you want Glinda to be a good person. More so because the relationship she has with Elphaba proves that it's all there inside her if she would just act on it. But even when she does, it is satisfying in a bittersweet sense that her choices have to carry weight through to the end, because it doesn't diminish all the pain she put Elphaba through. This is important to point out because I think you can find examples of Disney actually cracking the code on why people liked Glinda, namely, acknowledging that characters might have negative influences to overcome. One of the rare high points of the chintzy home video sequel era was a redemption and romance for evil stepsister Anastasia, whose relationship with her mother and her own insecurities were elaborated on without unreasonably downplaying her prior behavior. Charlotte LaBeouf is airheaded, kind of ignorant of her own privilege, and, like Glinda, certifiably fucking insane, but gives up her chance to marry a prince without any reward just so she can help her friend. People liked that these girls could choose to act against traits or beliefs we would find disagreeable or misguided, because that's what makes a character interesting. Those allowances are only made, however, because these are side characters. Characters millions of people aren't expected to take as seriously or relate to as much. Characters who do not have to carry entire lines of merchandise.
A fairy tale awaits you with Cinderella's interactive talking vanity. Insert the key to unlock the magic, and Cinderella appears with a special message.
Tinkerbell can be a jealous little queen in Peter Pan, but once she's selling Disneyland tickets and going into Pixie Hollow, she's got to clean that shit right up. The choices of protagonists, particularly female ones, are under a lot more scrutiny. And thus we arrive at Frozen. What's clear in hindsight is that the reason people latched onto Elsa so strongly is because truly she is the one thing the first movie is treating without any cutesy-winky sense of irony, which is problematic considering she isn't in it particularly much. For all of my gripes, I stand by that when Frozen's about Elsa, the tone of the movie is noticeably tighter, which is probably why on top of having the big song and the magic powers, she came out the more popular sister. But Anna is the intended protagonist of Frozen the First, and I would be lying if I said I find her to be a character with a lot of emotional thrust. Whatever strength she does have on her own is hurt by a lot of overlapping traits with much more interesting characters, on top of 75% of the first movie being an overlong rip on one Disney trope.
And you are?
Giselle.
Oh, Giselle! We shall be married in the morning.
And the jokes were only vaguely novel in 2013, so imagine me sitting here revisiting this film in 2026, begging for death. This was a huge point of consternation for the company, because if there was one particular brand element they were trying to really get back on track, it was princesses.
Today is a perfect day to get married.
Boy, did they need to do some PR work on the princesses. The pendulum had swung back on the hyper-consumerist, hyper-sexualized pop princess movement of the aughts, and they were firmly stuck under the gun. And yeah, it was worth a second to review their priorities, explore different narratives for girls, maybe make some of the princesses less booby. But much like Maleficent's acquiescence to the popular misread of its source material, a lot of the changes being made were not always motivated by good faith critiques.
Abandoning your whole family and giving up your voice for a man you don't know? Really smart, Ariel. Wow, Belle, why aren't you trying to escape this castle with a big scary beast in it? Do you like being a prisoner? Do you need a man to save you? Sure, Jasmine. Being a super rich princess with a huge comfortable palace and food every day really does suck. Why don't you tell that to the poor people outside?
I'm not saying there's nothing there worth criticizing, but it really is easy to demonize every Disney princess if you put the cold facts of the movie on paper and then warp them into the least flattering light possible, because catching a children's film on menial legal technicalities was, for a period of time, considered both legitimate criticism and how to demonstrate you respected it as a piece of adult art. Also didn't help that their initial rebuttal to many of those complaints came in the form of Merida, a very obstinate character whose rash, impulsive decisions break the mold for princesses in a way that I respect, and unfortunately come with the direct byproduct of making Brave worse. And as a response, Disney women have spent the past 15 years feeling severely neutered. They do not want to relitigate these debates online.
I guess I could stand up for myself.
Yes. Yes, you
No,
can say
I'm just gonna wait for a man to save me.
The moral of my story's changing for a man.
I'm gonna wreck it!
No, he looks dangerous. I can fix him.
So most of the time, their character flaws tap out at cares too much, or awkward but cute, or if you're a non-human, you might even get as far as slightly racist. Post-Merida, there's been a really hard steer away from putting any of them in situations which could be perceived as too victimizing, or having them act in ways which might be too negative. No, Raya, you have to trust the woman who betrayed you 1,000,000 times. When they go low, we go high. I don't expect anything as thorny as the actual sister relationship in Wicked, because that isn't the central dynamic and it's obviously written to have a foregone tragic quality, but there feels like this massive safety blanket weighing down Anna and Elsa so no one has to say anything out loud, which would make someone look bad. The one time Anna does, it's wedged next to a much more severe mistake, which juxtaposed with one another makes it look like she shouldn't have brought it up at all. And not being able to air out any real problems moving forward makes the movie and their relationship, on the whole, weaker. And in this case, it's really pronounced by the decision to deviate from the original tale of the Snow Queen and make these girls sisters, because as someone with a sister, I'll tell you one thing about sibling fights. I don't care if both of you have been equally wronged. I don't care how healthy your relationship is 90% of the time. I don't care if you love each other as deeply as it's possible for sisters to do. Once you're into it and it's happening, that shit is all emotion and uniquely brutal.
You stole my mommy!
Yes, Elsa, even if it was because of your mental health, you did act in ways which hurt your sister, and that doesn't go away because you sent in a self-tape for RuPaul's Drag Race. No, Anna, you don't understand what Elsa's going through, and you're not helping the situation by going up to her house and telling her not to be sad anymore. Acknowledging any of these actions as wholly well-intentioned yet flawed doesn't make these characters bad people. It just makes them people. There's a really good scene that they added and then cut for some reason from Wicked Part 1, where they lay out two really interesting things about Glinda and Elphaba's dynamic. One, that Glinda wants real magic power, but due to how relatively comfortable her life is, has never needed a built-in defense mechanism in the same way Elphaba has, nor does she understand how that has helped and hindered Elphaba throughout her life.
Maybe it's harder for you to make magic because things have been kind of easy for you, so you don't need it.
And two, that Glinda directly expresses her desire for Elphaba to see her as someone she can rely on for help, because again, subconsciously, she wants something that she feels she's earned, and she is earning Elphaba's trust.
If you needed someone, could have picked me.
These are ideas which kind of exist in the musical already, but it isn't the worst idea to enunciate them in an expanded cut. Because if you stick it into the timeline of the film, not 20 minutes later, Elphaba is taking her up on that offer, and Glinda balks. Glinda says no to the thing she just said she wanted for the exact reason she can't have the other thing she really wants. This is an immensely frustrating thing for a character to do, but whether or not you have that cut scene in mind, it keeps the trajectory of Glinda's character engaging. If she knows that this is wrong, but is too scared to act on it, when is she finally going to hit her limit and do what's right? And I keep thinking about this one video by Tube Cody, which synchronizes Defying Gravity with a custom track in Roller Coaster Tycoon, and how legitimately torn up I got when the little Elphaba car gets closer to the little Glinda car, and then the Glinda car drifts away because it's not brave enough to go with the Elphaba car, but the Elphaba car is only brave enough to go because the Glinda car believed in her. I think it actually made me more emotional than the actual moment in the musical, Jesus. But it's a great visual metaphor for how much push and pull there is between these characters. That they each want something the other has always had, that they aren't always on the same page, that they can't resolve problems the same way. But because they aren't always in sync, it hits even stronger when they finally come together. Doing the right thing is like never a question with Anna because she seemingly has no major limits or misconceptions to overcome as a person. At no point is whether or not she loves her sister ever in question.
I don't do cocaine!
She doesn't even know what it looks like.
I don't know what it looks like!
The one thing she does get wrong, she doesn't even really have any culpability in because the guy she fell in love with was secret evil anyway, so it's all his fault. And it's an issue that only gets worse in the next movie, when the sisters have to solve a problem with massive potential consequences for their home country. Like, okay, is it crazy to ask for a bit more internal conflict over learning that you are the princess of a nation which has been quietly throttling the neighboring indigenous community for decades? Like, I get why Elsa goes nuclear on this dam the spirits say they have to destroy, but is it so beyond the pale for me to say that Anna, the sister with a deeper connection to the people and culture of Arendelle, whose view of the world is infamously naive to the point where, as these movies will not stop reminding us, she nearly married a man she just met, isn't even momentarily looking for some explanation or workaround that doesn't completely make her home the bad guys here, some way everyone can be happy without the cost that has to be paid. But we, the audience, know the right thing for her to do is to smash the dam, so Anna can't really struggle with this for more than a minute and a half before some jackass on the internet starts going.
Wow, Anna, I guess you don't care about the native people. Huh. I guess you don't care about your own people. Huh. I guess you don't care about those houses. Huh.
Which, by the way, movie doesn't even follow through on destroying the town. So if there wasn't going to be any internal conflict on Anna's end, they could have at least knocked out a couple fucking boroughs to make it feel like a choice with weight. It's just frustrating to me that Disney believes audience enjoyment is now predicated on personally divorcing ourselves from any proximity to something we might consider wrongdoing. A choice a character makes we might not agree with. A belief that is unambiguously false. We do not want to be made to feel a character we can identify with might also do something the narrative will not support. And I think it speaks to this broader theme that hangs heavy over both Maleficent and especially Frozen. A theme which seems sort of like, well, duh, from a practical perspective, but as you peer deeper into the minutiae, really starts to eat away at the efficacy of these narratives, not only as riffs on Wicked's ideas, but just films on their own merits about historically misunderstood women. Namely, that by absolving its audience of wrongdoing, Disney would very much like to present itself as an entity which has never done anything substantially wrong.
Storm in the wind, what would you do?
So the reason I'm not charmed by Anna's irrepressible love for her sister isn't because I'm some stodgy bitch who hates supportive families. It's because a relationship, at least as a narrative function, is a living thing. For the purposes of a story, it needs either internal or external tension. If it's not in danger from the inside, it needs to be facing danger from the outside. Elsa's mental health issues are interesting. That relying on toxic coping mechanisms to mitigate harm is inwardly and outwardly making things worse, which I'm glad that K-pop Demon Hunters picked up on that as a great arc for a protagonist. But unlike Rumi's bandmates, Anna never really has a dark night of the soul where she thinks, oh, I guess I can't rely on my sister anymore, or oh, I guess she means it when she says she doesn't want a relationship, or oh, maybe people are right about my sister. Because the movie starts aggressively jangling keys at us before it even has to broach that Anna's just been shot by her sister, and that might at least ding her unwavering faith in their bond somewhat. Relentless positivity is a fine character drive, but it has to be constantly challenged. Take Steven Universe as a modern example for kids. Steven's kindness is his power, but it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to the relationships he builds. It's not just that he's really nice and he tells people he loves them, he's not a goddamn Care Bear. It's that internally, he has to be patient and adapt to each person's needs to break through to them. And the show illustrates why this is a radical approach because externally, the culture he's trying to do this within is extremely hostile to any form of imperfection or emotional vulnerability. The thing is that Frozen spent so long in development that the divide between Anna and Elsa feels sanded down to the nub. Concepts about what privileges one sister might have had that another lacked as a magical child or a non-magical child, how they may have been treated differently by their parents, or even how they were judged based on their ability to publicly adhere to their roles as princess, were raised and then completely struck out, which, again, feels like the filmmakers spent the entire time making the movie terrified of either sister looking wronger than the other. But do we even know what people think about Elsa? I mean, really know? Frozen wants to act like the outside tension is coming from the magic racist and the world's most self-congratulatory plot twist.
Do you think all the villains will show up? Not all.
Gosh, how we laughed.
But these influences are really only actively in play for the last, 30 minutes on and off. The villagers of Arendelle, who are going to have to accept Elsa later, don't seem to have any strongly held opinions on their two princesses, or really whatever happens to be going on at the moment, which is conspicuous because it's not like extras in a Disney movie have ever been known for reacting to things subtly.
Him with those ears that only a mother could love.
But behind that fair facade, I'm afraid she's rather odd.
Riff-raff! Straight back! Scoundrel! Take back!
That boy is a menace.
He's too dangerous to be around normal people!
You may look like a bride, but you will never bring your family honor.
Oh no, I glitched down. Oh.
So because the film wants as little disparity in the sisters' experiences as possible, no one has feelings strong enough about Anna's ability to assimilate or Elsa's lack thereof to warrant mentioning at all. And I'll be honest, it does give Elsa's crippling childhood fear of being outed this weird transactional quality of all you had to do was show them that you're a nice snow queen that makes ice rinks.
And suddenly, he wasn't racist anymore.
Which I think would be mitigated if you just demonstrated people on screen making the choice to accept Elsa as their magic queen the way that they do in Luca or Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Some people, they'll never accept him, but some will. And he seems to know how to find the good ones.
Also confusing, by the way, because the next movie introduces flashbacks of Anna and Elsa's magic racist king grandpa, so like, is bigotry a thing in Arendelle or not, guys? You gotta make up your mind. Maleficent and its sequel at least acknowledge that there is an engendered prejudice against the Fae folk in human society, which is interesting, but not only does it go full Pocahontas and try to both sides the humans and the bird people, it seems like once Pfeiffer is no longer around to tell everyone to be racist, she just sucks all of the racism out of the world along with her like some kind of sin eater. It's a bizarre dilemma where these events occur in a world which suggests real politics, but doesn't actually contain any. A hard chunk of Disney films released this past decade have existed in this neoliberal fugue state where whatever the thing is that is the problem with society can be resolved with your self-actualization and a can-do attitude. And it is an issue unique to the modern films, mainly because I think once social media made political reads of their material broadly more accessible, I think they started getting scared of making something like, say, Atlantis, and everyone, I don't know, watching the film and then taking away the intended message about American imperialism.
That crystal is the only thing keeping these people alive. You take that away and they'll die.
Knowing that, I'd double the price.
I was thinking triple.
And that creates an equally strange portrayal of the construct of wickedness. I think that someone up top might have taken the idea of wicked a bit too literally because, again, Elphaba is choosing to use her power to speak against injustices in the system. What she is not doing is choosing to be evil. But both Maleficent and Elsa turn so early on that they have this air of what I can only describe as Kingdom Hearts syndrome, where instead of doing the right thing outside of the political binary of goodness and being punished for it, their damage means their hearts are
clouded by darkness.
And their perky sister-daughter has to talk them into
choose to live in the light.
So what will Elsa accept? Light or darkness? I know I want to know.
I won't let her fall to darkness.
Cannot stress enough, Elphaba is literally right for 90% of the show. So when Glinda has to tell Elphaba not to go too far, that's Glinda rectifying her own mistake by not showing up for her before, not bonking her over the head with a keyblade and giving her a big speech about friendship. But you would only think that's necessary if your concept of wholly stepping outside an institutional code of good and bad, or nice and mean, even if that institution is explicitly broken, is inexorable from a shift in morality. A take which is really hard to parse when you open your film with this! There is also something insidious to me about the way that whatever subversive quality there may be to the Shrek for Girls romance between Elphaba and sexy Prince Fiero, a narrative salve for the bittersweet note the story lands on otherwise, and I love that, Yuri, but it is toxic.
Her sister. Use her sister.
has been retransferred back to the cute, traditionally feminine princesses, rather than either keeping the subversion or eschewing any romantic relationships with boys altogether. Because they want to write movies that pass the Bechdel test, but really don't want you thinking about girls kissing unless you're ready to ignore all the laws of... laws.
I know who you are.
Do you?
You're my fairy godmother.
Hello. Mother.
So we're sisters.
Fact, being Gothel's daughter, that makes us closer than friends. It makes us sisters.
I say insidious specifically because they've kind of crunched all of the good and bad faith critiques of the Princess brand into one stupid critique it's absurdly easy to make fun of. But in actuality, there hasn't really been a reckoning with the challenge Shrek raised almost 30 years ago.
I'm a princess, and this is not how a princess is meant to look.
That fairy tales are hostile towards characters who look and behave like Shrek and Fiona, whose choice to be happy in their own bodies is frequently challenged and belittled, a ball which Wicked picks up by asking us to consider that a character, and by extension an archetype we are already familiar with, might want more out of life than a role which presumes their options for any emotional relationships are limited.
A girl who cannot become a princess is doomed to become a witch.
Instead, these movies do away with the idea that physical attractiveness is a social factor at all. That there is no binary where a princess falls in love and a witch does not, even though there clearly still is to some extent, not being helped by the fact that all the lesbians fell in love with Elsa and now they can't actually give her a girlfriend.
I'm not anything. You have a fulfilling heterosexual marriage at the age of 18, and I've just spent 2 whole movies playing with snow. Both are equal and good.
And maybe that would be nice in a world where these protagonists had more diverse features and body types, and could expect equal opportunities for any kind of platonic or romantic narrative. You know, the same hypothetical universe where making your first black princess a frog was being done on an even playing field. But it becomes more frustrating when all of our leads still have to hew close enough to Barbie proportions to move merch. Can't do an Ursula movie, a thing which only makes more sense the longer you think about it. But yeah, sure, let's try a second time to get a Gaston spin-off off the ground. This is exactly what I was talking about with the gender thing, by the way. Gaston can physically intimidate a woman and strong-arm her into marriage when she explicitly says no, and well, maybe there's a version of the story where he's got some valid points, but God forbid Maleficent do one actual bad thing for more than 5 minutes before she's completely beyond the pale of human empathy. Maleficent can't even be kinda sorta green anymore, and if you want to argue, well, they just didn't want her to look like Elphaba, she's not green in the original fairy tale, consider literally the year prior, they had no such qualms making shrieking, scorned lover Theodora as pointy and green as they were legally allowed to do. Yeah, remember Theodora? Theodora's green. L. Frank Baum's Wicked Witch of the West is not green by design. And yet not only does Oz the Great and Powerful make her green to score extra nostalgia points off the back of the 39 film, it inflicts greenness and ugliness upon her as a punishment. Punishment, by the way, for succumbing to a moment of emotional vulnerability because a man used her body and then abandoned her. You know, the inciting fucking incident of Maleficent? But since we know Theodora is now completely and unambiguously wicked because of Party City Witch Sisters magic, the unwilling act of becoming green has, for all intents and purposes, sealed her fate. Meanwhile, Oz can be directly responsible for her making that choice, and it's just like a sappy learning moment for him.
And should you ever again find the goodness within you, you are welcome to return.
Man, I said I was sorry. It sure is a shame she wants to be a wicked witch forever now. And witches are old. And ugly. Which raises another point. As far as the Walt Disney Company is concerned, what is a witch? Glinda gets recontextualized as sort of a magic princess, but Theodora and Evanora are still very clearly witches. Ursula is still a witch. The Sanderson sisters are queer icons, and also still witches. That new Hexed movie is about witches, but it's about an entire witch world, which kind of alleviates the social pressure of being a witch and just makes you one of the good witches who would be doing fine if it weren't for those shitty evil witches fucking things up for all of us. And this is all kind of irrelevant because it's more about how your mom is overbearing because she's kind of embarrassed about how much weed she smoked as a teenager. But Maleficent has always been a fairy, and Elsa, a magical woman whose inherent powers have no clear source, neither identifies as nor is referred to as a witch, only being dubbed as a spirit by the sequel. Instead, the first film substitutes a different term for what Elsa and the people around her interpret her as.
Monster! Monster! Is there sorcery in you too? Are you a monster too?
Queen Elsa is a monster, and we are all in grave danger.
Don't be the monster they fear you are!
It's fair to say maybe they made this swap because once again we're anxious about skimming too visibly close to Wicked, which in this case I can kind of buy because, like, yeah. But that substitution does noticeably change the story we're being told here because the construct of a witch, a man-made construct, invokes the imagery of witch hunts. And witch hunts aren't characterized by a bunch of people being scared towards something they don't recognize as physically human. They're characterized by a higher authority abusing moral hysteria to encourage citizens to turn on each other, to pick out differences amongst themselves and target them in the name of maintaining some illusion of order, even if the logic is fakey fake bullshit.
She's old and warty and looks a bit evil. She was put to death, and her cat sent to prison.
And the belief that justifies it is that a monster can only respond with mindless violence, but a witch thinks. That she hides among other humans and is willfully being deceitful to do whatever it is she's doing to you on purpose. We have factual, historical precedent for the way we treat witches. Precedent Wicked isn't afraid to clearly invoke. And it's not a lot of broad misunderstandings being resolved by powerful women doing their best. Man, I sure can't wait for someone to tell us this is wrong. Don't we all wish our past was better? Don't we all genuinely wish we had never lived through periods where activists, communities, whole cultures were silenced because someone over us said it was morally okay, morally necessary even, and enough people trusted their government more than their gut for them to get away with it. But we have, and we do, and we will. And to remove ourselves from participation in that cycle because things are hypothetically better now, and we want, however rightly, for the past to have been kinder is a slipperier slope than you would think. Something something history, something something doom.
And I don't see why you can't just teach us history instead of always harping on the past.
Because we cannot escape the past, and we ignore it at our own peril.
Like, I had a whole segment about how brilliant it was for Wicked the film to subtextually tie Elphaba's greenness to the experiences of black women in the 2020s, and the constant unfair dichotomies they're subjected to in spaces white people feel implicitly entitled to. An observation which became immediately redundant after everyone turned Cynthia Erivo defending her fucking friend at a premiere for literally this movie into yet another example of the way we viciously punish anyone perceived as doing gender wrong, which, wow, wouldn't you know it, happens to fall disproportionately on black women.
When did you know you were tough? Like a protector, too? You're tough. You are a tough person. You're strong.
You know what? Fuck it. I'm not saying you personally have to love the woman, but I am going to say that if you laughed at any of those memes, it's my professional opinion that you specifically should feel worse about it. Sorry. Elphaba's story hinges on the idea that any personal attributes we consider distasteful inform some moral characteristic we can use as our pretense to judge their actions, and thus create a self-fulfilling narrative of inherent wickedness when they lash out. Her magic powers and green skin, but also, depending on the text, her religion, her race, her gender, her sexuality, even her hygiene are all objects of scrutiny. And that's before she starts saying things about the current administration that nobody wants to hear. It all comes back to that cutscene discussing the emotional relationship with magic. There are people who have to fight to exist in this world, and there are people who don't. At the end of the day, if Elphaba can't revolutionize the world by herself, the happiest outcome for her is to not have to justify her presence by being useful or powerful, not have to be constantly protecting herself the way other people don't.
I'm limited. I'm limited.
To be, if not normalized by the world at large, allowed a life with some degree of normalcy. To finally escape the constant abuse and have someone else take up the sword. Someone who is being offered so much power by the world already and could do something meaningful with it.
And just look at you. You can do all I couldn't do.
But we don't want to live in a reality where the consequences of our actions and beliefs might be so severe that the healthiest thing a person can do is extricate themselves from a faulty society, because that would potentially mean interrogating the ways we're quick to judge people of color, disabled people, queer people, trans people, people with any feature we can fixate on as unattractive or irksome for some reason I just can't place. And coming to a conclusion which makes us feel shameful. That would mean confronting the fact that we are not always Elphaba, and to some people that is as bad, if not worse, than recognizing personal fault.
The purpose, the point of a dramatic show, which is used as a vehicle of social criticism, is to involve an audience, to show them wherein their guilt lies, or at least indeed their association. But when you're talking about a bunch of cavalrymen knocking off a bunch of poor and putting them into a reservation, the audience need to have no association, certainly no guilt. How many Indians have they pushed into a reservation? But if indeed you talk about a denial of a man putting his garbage can next to yours by virtue of his color, now you're getting into a universal guilt, which they should feel, or at least in part understand.
We don't collectively hold any serious culpability in who becomes the Wicked Witch. It instead comes down to the witch to instigate change and reform her image by coming into her power, rather than asking us to think about why she might not have assumed that was okay to do in the first place. And if the witch is already nice, what does she realistically have to worry about as long as she keeps being what we consider to be nice? If her stats are good enough, it won't even matter that she wears glasses and listens to Blink-182.
Oh, look at that. She's got paint on her overalls. What is that?
Because we don't actually fear a powerful woman anymore. Literally, if you've noticed that they've tried to jam avatar powers into every princess from the last 15 years in the wake of Elsa's enduring success, which is why that Tiana series had to die, I guess. Jesus Christ, Tiana fans, the fucking worst treated of all time. No. Instead, we want her to be the...
Where are your troubles now? We have no troubles.
Oh, John. Oh, John. Oh, go, Johnny, go, 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 go. You just couldn't help yourself, could you? I haven't talked much about the Wicked films as their own texts, mainly because that opens up its own can of worms, but I was pleasantly surprised enough by Wicked Part 1 to even entertain this video as a project, even though it's a scenario where the source material and lead performances are strong enough that the film adaptation can't buckle under the weight of frequently being shot like a car commercial. And I think that everyone who was already in the weeds with Wicked the musical knew to temper their expectations for Part 2, but the first movie was already such a win in spite of itself that it wasn't so beyond the pale to expect they could do the hat trick again and use that extra time to patch up some of those weak spots like the pacing, and the songs, and the Fiero romance. In case you watched Wicked the same way that I watched Westworld, i.e., watch the first part everybody liked and then deliberately ignore they ever made any more besides that one episode with Zane McLaren, I regret to inform you that that didn't happen. It is a shame that the Wicked train had to crash into the station like this after a stronger first outing than I think anyone expected, especially because it also punished me for even vaguely enjoying things about part 1 by confirming my deepest fear about part 2. As it is, the ending of the musical is a perfectly strong place to leave it off. Change may come with Glinda's guidance, but whether she can do it or not, it is coming at a bitter cost. And it's up to the people to absorb what she's trying to teach them, both in and out of universe. As a wise Tumblr sexy man once put it,
unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
But from minute 1, it's been very clear that Wicked has been replicating the business model of the recent spate of live-action remakes. Movies which you can merchandise to kids because they're fairy tales that have Barbies in them, and to adults because they're both nostalgic and, big air quotes here, more realistic. And if I worried about the Wicked adaptation following any trend from those films, it is the frantic urge to make sure anything potentially questionable as an ideological gap is safely and unambiguously sealed by the end of the narrative, in a way which will keep its audience broadly satisfied while reflecting positively on the brand's politics. Insert Lindsay Ellis's woke Disney video here. This trend often calcified into the entity of the nice lady president, a figurehead for progressive change in the sense that she's a woman, and she's nice, and she's gonna prove that the problem with the puppy-crushing machine only exists when mean people are driving it. A girl can passively endorse war crimes just as good as any man.
Wow, a girl president? How progressive! And a Hitler! Boy, things are really looking up!
So when you know it, here comes Wicked Part 2 with a retooled ending where the nanosecond Glinda suits up like Iron Man and takes power. Literally all of the animals who fled the nation for their own safety come straight back to Oz to reintegrate, and everyone is fine with it immediately.
And suddenly, he wasn't racist anymore.
Okay, so that wasn't happy enough for you. Dr. Dillamond is okay now. He can talk again. He gets his job back. Wow, I'm so relieved. Turns out you can literally unsilence victims of political cover-ups, rather than the awful shit that usually happens to those people, which we then just kinda have to live with the ugly implications of forever. I am talking about the studio that thought the ending to The Lorax was too much of a downer, though. No corporation is your friend, understand that much. As with a lot of this video, you gotta understand this is a Doyleist critique, not a Watsonian critique, because fucking of course, I don't want Oz to remain racially segregated. And in the increasingly hostile Trump 2 era, I can understand why there might be some motivation to actually demonstrate Glinda using her influence for the benefit of the animals. But yes, to put it bluntly, it is a thematic inconsistency with the rest of the work to perpetuate the idea that healing the scars of fascism is as simple as putting the nice lady president in charge, whose radical 180 from the policies she was passively endorsing a day ago will be adopted instantly by the same people who just had their torches and buckets out to do a race war. I'd like to think that we all have enough political acumen in 2026 to understand why that rhetoric is massively unhelpful. I don't know, I was pretty young when Obama got elected. This is definitely what happened, right? This is how that went. I am not saying that Wicked is a super radical text or anything. At the end of the day, it's still product. It's simple, it's accessible, it steers closer to Hamilton than How to Blow Up a Pipeline. But it is, for all intents and purposes, a mass appeal musical with broadly the same audience as the average Disney film, asking that audience to think somewhat critically about our participation in institutions of power. And for the most part, the movies retain that in such a way that the newer, glossier ending does seem jarring and out of place because Wicked is largely good at what it's trying to do, but that the consequences of Disney trying to toothlessly ape Wicked's narrative without the harsher observations on real-world politics which give its narrative stakes, are vast enough that they have now directly impacted the original text is a little bit frightening, to say the least. It's not in Disney's best interests to portray themselves as an institution with the amount of power to sway the industry it's in, or even culture as a whole. It is objectively better off as product if you conceptualize it as some sort of cute, omnipresent idea that just naturally occurs in all of us, like crude oil or homosexual thoughts. And if you believe in it hard enough, if you consume correctly enough, and you're looking for these films to give you progressive commentary, you can turn this film for children, or this Loungefly backpack, or this Mickey waffle into praxis. The exact attitude that the people of Oz are encouraged to take towards their support of Glinda. Look at this product, aren't you better for backing this product? Isn't it just that easy to do the right thing? This is not just conjecture based on how all corporations sell your own values back to you. There is one more text I've got in my back pocket, and it's one of the company's most direct attempts to address its politics than any Disney film before. Or, based on its performance and the current state of the company, probably for a while. I debated for a long time whether or not I should even bring up Wish. Partially because it is so brain-fizzingly mediocre that my attempt to make a full-length essay about it was completely cursed, and I'm still kind of sore over it if you really want to ask me. But also, by 2026, we've now fully transitioned away from cribbing things that worked in Wicked to cribbing things that worked in Frozen. That's the playbook. It's not really about redeeming wicked witches anymore. However, there is a crucial plot point in Wish that shares blood with Wicked, and it's one which doesn't have as much of an equivalent in any of the other movies I've mentioned. Namely, it's Elphaba's relationship with the wizard. One thing I think people overlook about Wicked in an attempt to make the good and evil stakes more binary is that Elphaba and the wizard have irreconcilable differences politically, but the element of tragedy is that they are the thing the other has always secretly wanted most. The wizard's always wanted a more personal, familial relationship than his patriarchal rule over Oz, while Elphaba has never had a parent who loves her and always dreamed the wizard would fill that role. That is a very vulnerable need, and it makes it even worse when she almost has it, but at an incredibly bloody cost.
Read it. Cast a spell. Read it!
Elphaba wanted to believe in the wizard's power to bring about change more than anyone because it would prove that the world could be fair, that it would give her struggles a material reward. It's not fun for her to turn that down when it's being offered to her, but it would be a complete betrayal of her values if she didn't. And the consequences of that choice turned out to be way heavier than one person could ever feasibly bear alone, to the point where he nearly talks her into dropping her revolution altogether and embracing the family she's always wanted. So why is Glinda here? Why is Glinda here? Bitch, get out of the song! Why is Glinda here? Asha's dream is to help King Magnifico grant wishes, but it turns out Magnifico is less like a cute Uncle Walt autocrat and more of a paranoid Robert House autocrat, and the parallels from here are pretty clear. Two people who think they want the same thing are ethically incompatible, leading to a complete perspective shift of the ruling system, which spurs our young protagonist to rebel against it with unforeseen magical power. Or in Asha's case, a fun plushie. Okay, so this is the text of the film. Magnifico is clearly supposed to be some analogous representation of the old guard of Disney, but the metaphor is messy because the star is also Disney. Like, I guess Magnifico is the domineering enigma of Daddy Walt, but that, doesn't really work as commentary because the company, to this day, does not like interrogating the thornier details of Walt's political views. And even if it did, he has had very little influence over their output for a very long time on account of being very dead. And the Luma is like the spirit of Disney, the brand, or Disney magic, I guess, which is also sort of a proletariat thing, because actually we're all stars, and it comes to the universe, we're all shareholders. Get back for your system! But not so much insofar as we can use actual magic without Disney's direct intervention. Are you seeing? Are we all finally understanding now why I couldn't finish that stupid fucking essay? More importantly, Asha has no real love lost with Magnifico. She's a fan. She has a perfectly functional family and a thriving social life. There is no loss of innocence investing enough here to make it feel like we've earned our defying gravity.
But when I speak, they tell me sit down. Wondrous, powerful wishes that will never be granted. Asha? Just floating there. Asha, helpless.
Sit down. Calm down.
Instead, the film chucks out any salient commentary on the company and throws Magnifico at an evil book that makes him so evil that the movie says he literally cannot be redeemed.
Embrace forbidden magic just once, and you commit to it for eternity.
The bad guy's gone, the day is saved, thank God we have a nice lady president we all like to make the activism and subsequent transition of power as painless as humanly possible. My favorite thing about the system is that as long as nice people are running it, nothing bad ever happens and no one is ever wrong about anything ever again.
The systems aren't the problem. How people use and exploit the system, that's the problem.
You need to be a real savant in political allegory to successfully cast yourself as both the rebellion and the thing that needs to be rebelled against, which the writers of this film very much are not. It is a story about activism that, once again, doesn't want to commit to any real politics. And it's especially aged badly because Disney, which is a company that's always been vaguely left of center anyways, got really allergic to whatever chuds on the internet would deem politics ever since it started to look like the returning governing body would have a personal vendetta against them. Trans sports episode? We never wrote, produced, and completed a trans sports episode. Rachel Zegler can't have the exact same political opinions as Mark Ruffalo. What if she offends people who already spent 2 years battering her with racist abuse that we just never denounced? What the fuck's a Nimona? So it once again crafts a very neoliberal pastiche of history, which invokes the idea of real systemic wrongs, but proposes that the institution and all the little people within it will unanimously right themselves against bad actors. A version of history which never lingers on what the failings were and why, because actually admitting any direct instances of personal fault endangers its own continued viability as product on both sides of the political sphere. We are doing better now. Whatever we did then, we're doing whatever we all agree is right now. It's painfully ironic when you think about it. And that's already such a self-aggrandizing approach, but also a pretty duplicitous one. Once the median consumer seemingly changes their mind about what the right thing is, which values quietly fall by the wayside in the interest of maintaining market stability. In case you're wondering whether that's really a risk, there's a recent commercial I spotted, which I'm sure is just intended to prey on your memories of the VHS era, but only wound up giving me the same weird ick as the Department of Homeland Security Twitter constantly posting AI-generated 80s nostalgia return shit, which I can't guarantee that they aren't trying to invoke. The woke took Simba from you, consumer. Once the next progressive swing of the pendulum comes along, you put your money on it now, going right back to first gay so-and-such minor character again, as if they haven't ceded space for bigots at every turn. And I'm telling you in advance, you are allowed to ask for more actual accountability next time than we have all now decided to do the right thing. Not just from Disney, but from any large corporation that crumpled like tissue paper after 10 years of touting their own progressive values for cash, because it never really wanted to question or challenge its own history or its role in pop culture, only maintain it under intense pressure. But at its core, Wicked is a cautionary tale about history. The inherent emotional strength in the premise is this sense of innocence being lost, that at any stage of our lives we're both susceptible to manipulation from institutions we're taught to trust, even when those institutions punish us, and enabling legitimate atrocities with our own unchecked prejudices. I think anyone who's gone through the American school system has had that feeling where you grow up and realize that certain moments in history, or hell, even current events, were misrepresented to you while you were still young and impressionable and easy to take advantage of. And the reason people on the opposite side double down on the misinformation is because the idea that they were lied to, passively or actively, by an authority figure they put their faith in is just too shattering to confront. And Wicked asks us directly, what would change if we learned that the popular narrative of The Wizard of Oz was an incomplete text? Disney doesn't want to ask these questions about Sleeping Beauty, nor does it want you to ask them about Frozen or Wish down the line. It now often preemptively makes these movies on the back foot, terrified of another decade of Belle was too mean to those villagers rhetoric. We're sorry we took that angry sexist mob seriously when they acted angry and sexist. Once we all come out on the other end of this, we'll realize everyone was just scared and confused. Actions don't have consequences as long as you say you were sorry and actually always secretly disagreed with the way that things were going. So instead, we keep shunting any serious efforts to interrogate where entire institutions we are participating in fail, where we are currently capable of failure, putting the blame at the feet of one or two bad actors who will never be charismatic enough to reassess down the line, and creating a bubble where everyone can be Elsa. History was only moderately wrong once or twice, and no one has to leave with any notions of a maladaptive system they may want to distance themselves from in some tangible way. I don't know, hypothetically speaking, not blindly dumping your cash into more Disney product. It's very easy to be bitter about the 2010s. Trust me, I lived it. But of course I understand why they took advantage of the optimism of the Obama era to move away from angry mobs and into more nuanced conflicts which could be solved with words and understanding rather than swords. A gentler, more accepting world hypothetically means less of a political divide to bridge and a much easier time selling toys to everybody, on top of just being an agreeable idea. But as it became clear that the position of being empathetic towards people was a politically charged take, and that in the real world, that take prompted volatile retaliation, the company didn't really know how to course correct without accusing anybody of anything. So we got stuck in this middling, non-committal rut where women still can't be openly queer, but they can be an incrementally more powerful gun that just has to keep believing in itself harder movie by movie. Book those seats now for Frozen 3. Elsa gets an even bigger castle this time and ascends to fucking space. But culturally, none of these vague gestures towards progressivism or counterculture stopped the brand from winding up right back where it was at the start of the 10s, if not a little bit worse. The halcyon days of hipster Ariel are long gone. Sure, they own everything. Sure, the movies make money, but genuinely, the strongest positive buzz I've seen any of them generate on the internet since We Don't Talk About Bruno is people admitting they're sexually attracted to Conan O'Brien's character from Toy Story 5, and that depends very heavily on your definition of positive. They release, they profit, and then they seemingly vanish. The desperation to never be made fun of online again, and the fear of ever being perceived as wrong, both compounded by their general sag in finances since COVID, have basically paralyzed the studio creatively and emotionally. Yet somehow the Wicked movies, hobbled as they might have been in some ways by the modern cinema landscape, still got me to reevaluate my relationship with the source material. You know, those kids I struggled to fit in with, a lot of them were Elphaba in their own way, too. And as a kid or an adult, Elphaba's fortitude and kindness in the face of relentless cruelty should inspire you. but in a period which also encourages us to disengage with critical thought and not only attach morality to our commodities, but commodify ourselves and our own morals. The warnings in the text have no such obligation to be kind. 'Cause otherwise, what do all these attempts amount to? A stream of content pretending to put out real fires with fake water? Or just a few years of guaranteed real estate on Hot Topics shelves before Has-Been Hotel takes over? Maybe. Maybe it was just a phase after all. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching all of Disney Gets Wicked. My longest video to date, and truly a labor of love. Jesus Christ. Thanks as always to my script advisor Samuel, as well as Eric Ravenscraft, who did some additional script review for me. My friend Josh, as mentioned, who suffered through Oz the Great and Powerful with me, and our guest voice, Steve Yurko, who took time out of his very busy schedule to provide maybe not the most flattering voice I could have asked him to do, but he did it, so, you know. As always, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'm very interested in hearing. If you would like to support the channel and ensure that I can keep making long videos like this, you can go to my Patreon in the description below, where your perks now include getting monthly movie reviews, which cover everything that I've watched in a month, including the only place where I'm going to be talking about Obsession. The plan is to have that uploaded this month, once this video is out and alive and thriving. But you will only get access to that as a paid patron. You can also join the Blue Jacket tier if you'd like to see the scripts for upcoming videos, including one which is close to completion, and a few more ideas that are on the way. Additionally, your patron perks also include full movie commentaries to go with our new show Girl Perverts. Myself and Vero, aka Genko Crown, we have a podcast which is our ode to girl trash movies and TV shows. As of uploading, the newest episode will be about the Whole Cake Island arc in One Piece, featuring our friend Melon T. So tune into that, we post every month. And yeah, thank you as always. I really work hard on these things. It means a lot to me that you would support the channel and bother with whatever the hell it is that I do. But I will see you next time, and this video was sponsored by Squarespace.